Right, for today's tutorial we're going to look at the sweet pea, and the equipment that I need is I need some sweet pea cutters, and these usually come in sets of 3 or 2, and if you've got a box set of cutters you'll probably find that they're within that. Okay, so the first cutter I need is a rose petal cutter, a small one. Now some sweet pea sets have these included and some don't. If they don't and you've got a small rose petal cutter, then you can use that. The second cutter I need is the sweet pea first stage cutter, and this is like a kidney shaped cutter. And the final cutter is for the outer petal of the sweet pea. So it's a very quick and easy flower to make, and it's suitable for putting into bouquets or just having them on their own. Now I'm going to make the flower today in white paste, but you can make them in a variety of colours. There are some very vibrant colours and there are some very pale pastel colours. Usually if there's going to be pastel you would make it white or ivory and then dust up with your colour. So I need some good quality flower paste as usual. I need some 28 or 26 gauge wires, so these are quite thin because it's not a very big flower. I also need a tiny amount of white shortening, white fat. I need my edible glue and a brush. I need a small rolling pin. I'm going to use my cell stick, but you could use a ball tool, and I'm also going to use my small palette knife. Now I've also got to hand my cool pad that I've created. If you watch the rose petal tutorial you will have noticed that I've used this from a J cloth and a plastic bag, and for that video I used 2, but for this time I'm just using 1 and I'm folding it over, and this just facilitates being able to make several petals at a time, and it does cut down on time. I've also got my sponge pad and I've got my half width green tape. Okay, so let's get started. So the first thing I need to do is I need to set the centres, and I'm going to set that on my 26 gauge wire. I'm going to use, as I've said, white paste, and I only need a very tiny amount of paste to set the pea on the wire, because this part is going to be actually covered up unless you're going to have it as a very small bud. I'm moulding it round on the palm of my hand, and then I'm going to make our slightly cone shape that you should be quite familiar with now, because this forms the basis of a lot of flowers. I'm going to put my end of my wire into my glue, and then I'm going to feed that into my paste that I've moulded, and then I'm just going to secure it on the wire. So it's not going to be very big. If I want to make it a little bit elongated, I can just squash the edges in a small amount, just so that it becomes a bit narrow. So it ends up looking a bit like a cotton bud, but tinier. Okay, and then I'm going to leave that to dry. Now ideally, as with everything, the longer you leave things to dry the better, and the ideal time for drying is obviously overnight or a minimum of 12 hours. So I'll just put that to one side. Now I do have one that I made earlier that I can put the next stages on. Okay, this was made a couple of days ago actually, so it should be really set onto the wire. And I'm just going to roll out and cut out the amount of petals that I need. So I just need a small amount of my white paste. Knead it well. Make sure that there's no little lumps and bumps in it. If it's sticking on your board, then you'd use a small amount of white shortening, but only a very minuscule amount. I'm doing even pressures and I'm making this thin. Okay, it needs to be very, very thin and delicate in appearance, and then it will give us a natural looking flower. Now sweet peas themselves do have leaves when they're growing, but they tend to be towards the bottom of the plant, and as the plant is quite trailing by nature, you just mostly see the flowers and the tendrils. So you don't need to make leaves for your sweet pea. You can use in your arrangements other flowers. So they look well with rose leaves. They also look well with ivy leaves. Okay, so I've rolled that nice and thinly, and I'm going to cut out using my small rose petal cutter. Okay, and I'm just going to put this onto my sponge pad. And then I'm going to come back and I'm going to cut one of my kidney shaped cutters and one of my back larger petal. Now if you don't have any rose petal cutters, you can always mould the central petal with your fingers. These I'm going to put under my pad, my cool pad. Okay. Now you can do this in stages, or you can do it in virtually one operation. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to thin out the edge of my petal, and I'm going to make it a little bit broader by opening it out in the centre, backwards and forwards, from side to side, and that makes it just a little bit wider. And then I'm going to put a little bit of glue in the centre, and I'm going to take the bud that I have on the wire, and I'm just going to fold the petal towards the centre. So I want the two edges of the petal to touch each other. So it's a bit like a Cornish pasty shape. So I'm pressing that together, I'm tapering it onto the wire. It should be very thin, the paste, it shouldn't be too thick. And you pinch it so that you pinch it together. And then the top edge you just curl back. So it looks a bit like the feathers that's on the top of a Roman soldier's helmet. Okay. So it should be curled slightly back. And then I'm going to put that to one side while I prepare the next petal. So you can do them in stages, so you can prepare all that stage and then all the next stage and the third stage, or you can do it, as I say, in one operation. Now I'm going to do it in one operation to save time. And what I'm now doing is, with the kidney shape, I'm just going around the edge of it and I'm balling it with my cell stick. But you can use a ball tool to do this. Okay, I'm just hollowing out the centre a little bit. Make sure it's nice and frilly. Some sweet pea varieties are very frilly and others are quite straight. So there's no really hard and fast rule to how frilly they should be on the edge. And then I'm just going to take that centre that we've just made and I'm going to pick up the kidney shape, and you'll notice that it's got a deep V, and where that deep V is, the point on the top of the board is going to fit through there, and I'm just going to press it in at the bottom slightly. Now if it's not anchoring as you want, you can always put more glue. Taper it into your wire, and then I'm going to just curl them back ever so slightly, so a bit like I did with the rose petals between my fingers. I'm just curling it back slightly to give it a little bit of movement. Now if it drops down, then it might be that you just need to put a bit more glue on to secure it. Now if it's a flower that's just opening, then this will be your next stage after the bud stage. So you've got your bud stage, and then you would have this stage, okay? And you might actually have one that's just the pasty stage as well. Okay, so that's nice and secure now, and I can put that to one side while I prepare the back petal. So I'm going to take the larger petal now, and I'm going to take my cell stick and I'm going to frill around the edge of that. Okay. Now if you put too much water on your cloths inside the plastic bag, if you're making the cool pad, you might find that the paste will be a little bit on the sticky side, and so you'll find it more difficult to get it to roll up. So frill around the edge. As I say, some varieties are very frilly and others are quite straight. This is a bit on the sticky side because the pad is a little bit too damp. So I'm going to put some glue at the bottom. I'm going to pick it up and then I'm going to place this at the base of where the kidney shape was. And I'm just going to manoeuvre it a little bit with my fingers. Now if it's falling forwards, you can either put a little bit more glue on, but what you must remember is that if you put a lot of glue on, where the glue is, it will not take any dust if you want to colour it up at a later stage. So you need to keep your glue to a minimum. Okay. Shape it with your fingers, fold it over slightly, and then allow it to dry. I'll just put that into place. Okay. And what we need to do now is to prepare the tendrils. Now it does have a calyx on, so I'm just going to give a couple of seconds for that to dry up a little bit before I put the calyx on to show you. But if you take the wire that you've used, either 28 or 26, and you put it around your cell stick, you twist it round, and then you pull it off and you pull it up slightly, you get these curly effects. Okay. And this makes the ideal tendril. So I'll just do another one. So wrap it around the stick, slide your stick out. You could use a paintbrush for this, and then just pull it slightly, because the real sweet pea uses these tendrils to cling on wherever it's growing. So if it was growing up a fence, then it would, cling onto the fence with the tendrils before it shooted to make a further sort of like climb up the fence or wall or whichever it's attached to. Okay, now to make the calyx, I'm going to take a little bit of gooseberry green paste, and I'm just going to roll that up. I'm going to roll it into a slice sausage, and then I'm going to roll it out. Okay, it needs to be fairly thin. And then with a knife, not a sharp knife if you're cutting on your board, because otherwise you'll put score marks in it and you'll wreck it. But if you've got a blunt knife, you can do it here, otherwise you need to do it on a cutting board. I've got my diamond shape there, okay. And I'm just going to, with my cell stick, I'm just going to ball it upwards and outwards just a little bit, so that I make a little bit more length on it. I don't particularly want it too wide. And then I'm going to put a tiny bit of glue onto it. And then I'm going to take my sweet pea that we've made, okay. There's a motorbike going past. And then I'm going to just place it up the stem and anchor it to the flower. So it's only a very, very tiny calyx. But it is important that, we put one on. Okay. So I think you can just about see that there. It is only very small. And then you would leave all your flowers to set until you're ready to arrange them. And when you are ready to arrange them, what you could do, you could have them in different stages. So you could have a bud stage in the very first stage of the bud. Then you could have the second stage where it's got the kidney-shaped petals on. And then you could take another one that's got the 3 petals on. And all the time you're bringing these down further in length, so that they're about 3 to 5 centimetres apart. And then I'm just going to secure them with the tape, okay, and I can move them around, but remember you're moving them with the wire, because if you were going to dust them, this would be done before this stage. And then you would take your tendrils and you can place them in, tape them in when you're ready for them. You don't have to put too many tendrils with them, but you could just put 1 or 2. And they just get taped in to the wire. And then, depending upon how many sweet peas and how long you want your sort of like spray of sweet peas to be, would depend on how many you would add to the spray. So if I take another one, and this is the one that we did last, and place that on the spray, anchor my tape well, because we don't want it to look unsightly where we're taping. And as I say, we don't have to keep putting tendrils in, because they are quite sparse on the actual flower. And then I'm just going to put a last one in. Okay, again, I'm leaving the stem of about 5 centimetres before I put it in. I'm twisting my wire, and I might decide that I want to put another tendril in at this stage, so I'll put it so that it's in the middle. But mind it doesn't damage your flowers. And then I'm going to twist that. Okay. I could keep going on, depends how long, as I say, you want your, your spray to be. And then I'm going to trim off with my wire cutters, but you can use pliers, you can use scissors, but they might blunt if you use scissors. And there's our spray. So if I just stick that into my board and put it down, you can see there that we've got a nice spray of sweet peas.